Hello everyone! Happy Mother's Day! In the short time that I have been here, I have realized that the Ark is full of rich history and great stories. I wanted to do something very special this day. I'm here with Miss Carlson and her daughter Miss Pohly, and they are mother-daughter who both live here at the Ark. I thought it would be nice to share their story for Mother's Day. So let's start from the beginning. Where are you guys from?
Well, I was born in San Antonio, and Helen was born during World War II, and so she was born in Clinton, South Carolina, because her father-in-law had a hospital there, and that's why we were there.
And then you guys moved back to San Antonio during that time,
Then
or was
we followed Helen's father all during World War II to various places like Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas, Waco, and Randolph 3 times, and California. We followed him all during the war, as long as we could.
Now, when you kept moving to different places, did you always want to keep going back to San Antonio, or did you like other places better, like California or Oklahoma? Were you wishing that you were in San Antonio the whole time?
No, because when I couldn't follow him, I stayed in Clinton, South Carolina with his people.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the war ended, you guys came back to San Antonio?
Yes.
And you were actually, you taught your daughter, you were a teacher for her, right? Correct?
Yes, after World War II, we moved out to my family's ranch house because there wasn't too much real estate available for rent in San Antonio.
Uh-huh.
And nobody lived in the ranch house, so we moved out there. And my husband gave up his career in the Air Force, and so he began teaching at Harlandale High School, and I took the job of the only teacher at one teacher school just on the edge of our ranch. And I brought Helen to school with me every day. She was 5 years old then.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Did you like the way your mom taught or teach? Was she a good teacher? Did you learn a lot of skills like that?
Well, I really don't remember that. Really, the things I remember are things like the day she killed a snake climbing in the window off the roof, and the day and in the wintertime when she had to light the stove inside the schoolhouse, and we had an outhouse in the back. Those are the things I remember. And she was the only teacher, so we had a softball or a baseball, I'm not sure which one it was, team, and she was the coach, and we all played baseball every day, but she taught us to run the wrong direction around the bases. So
well, she was doing the best she could, right?
She did the best she could.
There was no internet to look at though. No. There was no Google back
well,
then.
Daddy was a coach over at Harlandale, but still.
Wow.
I don't think she asked him about that.
So when you killed that snake, do you remember that day?
Yes, I do. Because we didn't have screens on the window, and we saw this huge snake trying to come in the window from outside.
What?
And the children said, "Oh, look at this snake trying to come in the house," and they didn't know whether to be frightened or not. But so I said, "Well, run down to the nearest road and get a farmer and get him to come and get this snake out of here. I'm afraid of it." And so the children ran down to the road, and they got a farmer, and he came with a hoe, and he killed the snake. And the snake was having a problem. It had swallowed an egg, because it was a chicken snake, and it had swallowed this huge egg. It was glass egg that farmers put in their nests. And that was actually what was killing the snake, and it was trying to come in, trying to get help, I guess.
Wow. And since that day, the kids must have looked at you differently, huh? When that snake happened in the window?
That was really strange. We had lots of adventures together.
Mm-hmm. How long did you teach for in that school?
I just stayed there for 1 year, and then I went back to Incarnate Word and got my degree and taught in town after that.
Was Incarnate Word the first university in San Antonio, or was there more?
It's a Catholic university on Broadway.
Yes.
Uh-huh. I guess it was, well, St. Mary's University for boys was here, I think, before Incarnate Word.
That was all boys school.
I think so.
Wow, that's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but you also taught too. You were also a teacher.
Yes, I sure was. I was a teacher, but my deceased husband in the military, Army, was a dentist, and so I was a trained dental assistant too, so, at one time, so.
Now, when you were teaching, did you have flashbacks of when your mom was teaching you, of like lessons that you learned the way she was teaching?
No, because I was only with her 1 year at age 5.
Okay.
So I really don't have any flashback. I taught high school.
Yeah, that was
I was
different.
high school
That was a different type of.
Totally different.
How was it with the kids? Were they behaving well? Did they misbehave?
Well, I taught school from the 60s through the 2000s. So I had a lot of kids over a long period of time, and kids changed quite a bit during that time. But I did have lots of good kids. You really can think of only a very few kids that I ever had that I thought were real problems. Really, I have to say that. And at the latter part of my career, I was a gifted and talented specialist, and had a special program that was a mentorship program in place, placed students who were seniors all over San Antonio in all kinds of occupations. And many of them have gone on to be orthopedic surgeons and scientists and all kinds of things. And so,
Wow.
and I still hear from a lot of them on
That was
the internet.
good. They
on
still call you,
Facebook.
really?
On Facebook, I sure do.
So there's a picture you guys showed me. It was from the San Antonio Express newspaper. Is that correct?
Yes,
When you became a mother.
yes,
Do you remember when they took that picture?
yes. We came back to San Antonio at various times during World War II. And at the same time, my father was the mayor of San Antonio, and he had a very interesting career because of so many famous generals and so forth from overseas. Our allies came to San Antonio. It was a very interesting time. So I would come to town, and usually I was in the newspaper, and because it was very important socially at the time. And so quite often my picture was in the paper, and Helen's picture was in the paper, and so.
Did you like when they came to take pictures? You said you were used to it, right? Like it had always happened
I
since
was
you...
quite accustomed to it. I didn't think one way or the other about it.
And you have to remember that during this period of time, San Antonio was very small. Wasn't 3 million. It was more like 60,000 or something of this nature. I doubt it was much bigger than that. And also, social things were in the paper all the time. Nowadays, you have very few social things that go on.
Now, did it diminish the guess paparazzi or the newspaper in your life? Was there like a time where they weren't taking that many pictures of you guys anymore? Or was it in your life also? There was a lot of
We moved
attention.
away, and
We moved away.
And then my father wasn't in the paper anymore because he wasn't mayor anymore. And so Helen and I, my husband was recalled for Korea, so we weren't out very long. And we were back in the military, and he was flying out of he was stationed in Japan, flying back and forth to Korea. So, so we followed him to Japan and lived in Japan.
Miss Helen, how old were you when you guys were in Japan?
Well, I went over there when I was 9, and it was a very impressive time because I remember I didn't realize my father was in a war. I knew we had foxholes in the backyard. I did know that. But I remember one time he was flying back from Korea, and a lot of times, we didn't know he was out there flying, and he called ahead to Tachikawa and told them he was flying in, and he said he had just passed Santa Claus. Santa Claus was on his way to Tachikawa, and he saw him.
You said Santa Claus? So how old were you during that time?
Well, 9, 10,
So you believe that it was Santa Claus?
Well, I guess so, At least my brother did, So. But it was in many ways it was very stressful because I can remember smoke coming up from the runways and not realizing what it was, and it was planes coming back from Korea, and they had been shot at and hit, and they crashed upon landing. But I didn't realize all that smoke was the planes going up in flames, because I was so young.
Well, what memory do you have of being in Japan? What was like? Was there an event there? How long were you there for? Like, till what age?
We were there for 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I think the one thing about Korea that I remember the most is the fact that when we left on a military plane.
Mm-hmm.
And halfway, we landed at Midway, and then we were going to fly to Hawaii, and then fly to the United States, flying back home. And between Midway and Hawaii, my brother and I looked out the windows, and we saw two of the engines caught on fire.
Wow.
And so the plane just lilted like that, and we could see the waves down there, and nobody said anything, you know. But somebody came out of the where the pilot was sitting and got my father. He was a senior pilot, and took him back in front to help fly the plane.
So he had to rescue the plane.
He had to help rescue the plane. Later on, there was a movie made about it.
What?
Yes.
What's the name of the movie? What?
They made a movie, but it was the civilian pilot who was called back to the front.
Oh.
And it was the civilian pilot was John Wayne.
No way. That's crazy. Did they use the same name, or they changed the name?
The movie was called The High and the Mighty.
The bottle on yeah, homie, pull the bottle, quick. Welby, check your final position. I'm going to take her down.
Wait a few more minutes, Skipper.
Do as I say.
But it looks like...
Do as I say.
Give him a few more minutes.
I've already waited too long. Here we go.
No, we don't.
Get a hold of yourself, you yellow.
Uh-huh.
And
So was there someone playing you in the movie as well?
no, it was all civilians.
Oh, okay.
And it was all dramatic. So years later, I watched that movie, part of it anyway, because I'd never seen it. And I couldn't watch the whole thing because I was afraid it was going to crash. That they made it so dramatic. It didn't.
Wow. No, I also saw a picture that you had in London. You had your prom in London, is that correct?
Well, I went to a Air Force high school in London, England. And of course we had our prom there. We had it in a very auspicious building downtown. And it was very interesting. The thing I remember about the prom so much is the fact that when they were announcing couples and we all went down some stairs, I tripped and fell and rolled down to the bottom of the stairs.
No, really?
But that's all right.
Were you still able to dance that night?
Of course.
Well, what do you remember when you were in London?
Oh, well, we had a very, very interesting life in London. We were there 3 years. And the first year that we were there, we met a South African couple with the gold mining company. And they befriended us. And they always had tickets to everything furnished to them. And they always invited us to go with them. So we went to all the most famous restaurants. We went to all the first grade plays that played in London. And
Wow.
we just had a grand time. And yes, I really loved our 3 years in London.
There was a car from the prom picture, right? You said that car you guys didn't really drive. It was just...
No, that was my father's Sprite. He bought a Sprite when he was over there. But that's what I learned to drive in, on the other side of the road.
Right. That's how you learned how to drive. So then when you came here, was it confusing for you?
Well, it was, and my grandfather said he would help teach me how to drive on the other side, but I scared him so much that that lesson only lasted one time.
How did you scare him? What happened?
Well, he tried to teach me in an old Ford that didn't have automatic transmission. And so you can imagine how it was learning how to drive one with stick shift. Down Divine Road in San Antonio.
And did they make a movie about that one too, or no? Now, the ranch, correct me if I'm wrong, but the ranch that you taught at is now part of A&M San Antonio? Is that correct?
Yes, San Antonio.
Okay, and they're making it into a museum, part of it?
Well, the house that we lived in, Helen and I, when we lived out there, and the original house, which was very, very old, had some damage from a fire after we left, after Helen and I moved away. And so it really needs to be updated. And I hope that they're going to make a museum out of that house, because it's a very interesting house.
So you guys have seen San Antonio change probably more than anyone that I know, at least.
Well, it certainly has changed. It was just a village, I suppose you might say, when I was born. And so now, where our ranch is, they built the Toyota plant in Texas A&M.
Wow. And you never imagined that would happen when you would be over there.
Never thought about it. Of course not. No.
Wow.
And even north of here, if you think about it, I can remember my grandfather proposed when he was mayor to do 410 and 281. He proposed to do that, but it took years for those things to happen, 281 and 410. So when they finally opened up 410, my grandmother and my grandfather were invited to cut the ribbon on 410 and be the first people to drive on 410.
No. Wow.
And so anyway, my grandmother, she drove up the down ramp instead of the up ramp on the freeway. I remember that.
Wow.
But it didn't matter. They were the first ones, so.
Oh, no one could tell them anything, huh? Imagine if we do that now. Wow. But also in your family, if we go way back to centuries before, like 1800s, there was also very historical, right? Your great.
My mother's family, yes.
There's a story there with Stephen F. Austin that he gave you guys, that he gave him the
Land, they had a land grant.
We sold it to them.
So who was this? So the people that don't know.
That was my great-great-grandfather.
Okay.
Asa Mitchell.
Okay.
And that was the Asa Mitchell Ranch where the Texas A&M is now.
Wow. And Stephen F. Austin.
But that was not the land grant. His first land grant was near Columbus, Texas.
Okay.
Near Matagorda Bay.
Okay.
If you look on a map, near Matagorda. They landed on Matagorda Bay right before, I guess, a hurricane, and lost everything because they were dumped there by Stephen F. Austin, and the women and the children and a few men stayed behind, and the rest of the men had to walk all the way back to New Orleans and get more goods and more mules and bring them back to settle the land grant.
Now, Texas was still Mexico at that time.
Absolutely, it was a Mexican land grant.
Wow.
They were what they called Texians. And eventually, Asa Mitchell moved with his family up to what is now San Antonio. There was very little here, just the Alamo.
And the Alamo, you said, this was before the actual Alamo event, battle.
Yes, probably about 1836.
Okay, and what do you know any stories about when that actually happened? Like where your family was? Because they didn't go there, right? They went to San Jacinto?
They fought in the Battle of San Jacinto.
Okay.
Against Santa Anna.
Wow. Because they were not, they
were not in the Battle of Alamo.
No, they knew better than that because they knew that would be a losing cause. They joined San Houston and fought in the Battle of San Jacinto. And of course that was won by the Texians. And my great uncle Nathan, he spoke Spanish, and he was the one who negotiated the surrender of Santa Anna.
He was a translator.
He was a translator. He was only 16.
Wow. That's more than most 16-year-olds ever.
Right. He was the one who sold Davy Crockett his coonskin cap.
Right. That's another crazy story. So he sold him the famous hat that we all see when we think of David Crockett.
Well, when you see Davy Crockett, he's in a coonskin outfit and a coonskin cap, but well, that's not what he wore to the Alamo. He actually wore
He wore a stovetop.
He would have worn that, but he bought a coonskin cap from my Uncle Nathan, who was sitting on a fence when he came by to recruit him, and of course he turned him down on the recruit offer, but he did sell him a coonskin cap for that, for his top hat, Davy Crockett's top hat, and a $5 gold piece. So later on in the Battle of San Jacinto, Nathan wore the top hat in Davy Crockett's name.
Wow. That's crazy.
So things are often changed in history.
Right. Like those things, do you think that that story's in a history book somewhere? Or do you think
Oh,
that's,
it is, yes.
that specific story? Wow.
And of course, in my grandfather's book, he published a book.
No, he published a book, correct? What is, do you know the name of the book?
Well, it was a family history
Oh,
about
okay.
about the Mitchell Ranch.
Okay. And do you guys have a ranch now in the family, or have you guys?
Well, yes, your sister has a ranch.
Well, my
Burrville.
sister has a ranch, but none of the previous ranches belong in the family anymore.
Mm-hmm. So that brings me to a picture that I saw of your wedding, where you had all your sisters in that picture. Can we talk a little bit about that day?
About the wedding?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had 4 sisters and no brothers,
Okay.
and my husband had one sister. So that's all we needed for the wedding. We had 5 bridesmaids.
Was it a big event in San Antonio?
Well, it was, because
Highly.
my father was very active in the First Presbyterian Church.
Uh-huh.
And the wedding service was at the First Presbyterian Church. So it was a pretty big deal in our family anyway.
Okay. Now, so it seems like you guys have a really close relationship. What do you think that is? Like, for people who are becoming mothers, or maybe mother, grandmother, what is your, I guess, like, advice? Or what works for you guys?
Well, Helen and I have always been more like sisters.
Mm-hmm.
I've never really tried to boss her around like a mother.
Do you agree or do you disagree?
But, so we've always been very close.
Mm-hmm.
When Helen moved out here, and then my husband, her father died,
Mm-hmm.
she said, "Mother, what, you ought to move out here to the Ark." And so I had been out here playing bridge quite a few times before Helen ever moved out here. And so I knew it was just a lovely place. We had some bridge friends. The Daneys, that were one of the first people to move in out here, and we played bridge out here on Sunday night. And so that's where Helen heard about the Ark. And then, so when she moved out here, then she said, "Mother, you ought to move out here too." And so I did, because, well, I already knew about it anyway.
So did you know about it from the beginning, like when there was rumors of something being built, or?
Yes, I remember it from the beginning.
Wow.
And my friends were one of the first people to move in out here.
So you've known this place for a long time, since its origin,
Yes.
since its genesis. Wow.
And I'm interested in this area because we were stationed at Randolph 3 different times, so and I had friends who lived in Windcrest.
And but you actually moved here first.
Yes, but it was at the encouragement of my mother,
Uh-huh.
because she knew about it. I had never heard of it before.
You never heard of it before?
Even though I lived in San Antonio, I had never heard of the Army Residence Community.
Uh-huh.
Now we advertise quite a bit more.
Right.
Thank goodness we really have great advertising now.
Mm-hmm.
And so she told me about it.
And did you convince her? Did she convince you to move in, or?
Well, it was just very appropriate for me to move in. My husband had died, and it just worked out perfectly. And I love it out here.
How often do you guys see each other? Every day, or? How often do you guys see each other in here?
No, I see Helen at least once a week, and we talk on the phone a couple of times a week. But like I said, we're more like sisters. I don't try to get involved in her affairs. And she doesn't get involved in my affairs.
Is there any clubs that you guys are both in? Is there any activities you guys both do together?
Military
Yes,
civilian.
we were both, I was president of the Military Civilian Club when I was younger, and then Helen, after she moved out here, she was also president of the Military Civilian Club. That is a very active group that tries to keep the military and the civilians acquainted with each other.
Okay.
And San Antonio is a military city.
Of
so
course.
San Antonio civilians are really interested in the military. And we get together and entertain each other. And so I think that I have made lifelong friends in the military and civilian as well. And once a member, you can remain a member as long as you wish. And so I've been a member for 50 years. And I think that I've made some wonderful friends among the military. I feel that they feel the same way towards the civilians.
That's awesome.
And we've both been presidents in this organization. It's quite active. It now has a branch of the military that is a foundation, and we give lots of scholarships away every year. You have to be the child of an active military person or family, and that is the primary requisite in order to apply for a scholarship.
So Mother's Day is coming up. Is there any advice you guys would give to new mothers that's gonna happen this year when they're gonna become mothers, or maybe new grandmothers?
Well, one thing I would say is that it's very important to be involved in your children's lives. I was a working mother. My mother was a working mother. But we were always involved in our children's lives and in our grandchildren's lives. We never just avoided the children because of our work. And I think it's very important to really be involved in your children's lives, because as teachers we both know that if you're not involved in your children's lives, your children can really, really suffer in their youth and also in their adulthood.
No, I think Helen is right. It's very important to be involved in your family's life. Try to hold your little family together.
Right.
Happy Mother's Day. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful Mother's Day. See you soon.